There are promises you keep to the living, and there are promises you keep to the dead. This is a story about both. Spring 1888. The rains had passed, leaving Wyoming territory gleaming under impossible blue skies. Marcus Blackstone sat his bay gelding on the eastern ridge, 43 years old, 7 years a widower, built from the same hard material as the land itself. He was watching the morning mist burn off the valley when he saw it. Smoke, thin and gray, rising from Miller Hollow, where the old cabin stood. The structure had been empty for 8 years since fever took Thomas and Mary Miller and their 2 children in a single terrible week. Marcus had helped dig those graves. He'd nailed the door shut himself, haunted folks said, cursed. But smoke meant fire. Fire meant someone living. A memory flashed sharp and unwelcome. Mary Miller on her deathbed fever, bright eyes locked on his, her voice barely audible over her husband sobbing. "Promise me, Marcus. Don't let it go to ruin. Sarah would want someone to have a home there." He'd promised. Then he'd forgotten, buried the memory with everything else that hurt. Marcus nudged the gelding forward, descending at an easy walk. He was not a man who hurried. He simply moved with the inevitability of weather steady and certain. The cabin looked better than it should. Door straight on its hinges, roof patched with bark and flattened tin crude but effective. Yard swept clean. Someone wasn't hiding here. Someone was building home. Marcus reined in 20 yards out, right hand resting on his pistol. Not threatening, just ready. Then he heard it. A gasp, quick and sharp. Someone in pain trying not to make noise. He was off his horse, fast boots, hitting earth, silent. He didn't draw his weapon. Whatever was inside wasn't the kind of danger that required lead. The door swung open at his touch. The interior was dim. A stove glowing red. Rough table, single chair, an open trunk. And on the floor beside the stove, curled on a pallet of blankets, a woman. Small, slight, even accounting for the swell of her pregnant belly. Skin pale and slicked with sweat, dark hair plastered to her face. Young, maybe 30, fevered or in pain, or both. But alive. That was different from last time. That was something. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, "can you hear me?" Her eyes flew open, dark and wide with fear. She tried to push up one hand, going to her belly, the other scrabbling for something. Marcus saw metal glint. A tack hammer, small and useless as a weapon, but dangerous in desperate hands. "Easy," Marcus said, hands up and empty. "I'm not here to hurt you. Name's Marcus Blackstone. This is my land, but right now I need to know if you need a doctor." She stared at him, chest heaving, deciding if he was telling truth. Up close, he could see she was mixed heritage Chinese features blended with European. Her faded blue dress, once fine, was stained with dirt and blood. Lips cracked. She'd been here days, maybe longer, in no condition to be alone. "Please," she whispered, voice carrying the faintest British accent. "I mean no harm. The door was open. The roof leaked. I only wanted shelter until—" Her eyes rolled back. She slumped sideways unconscious. Marcus didn't waste time. He scooped her up, blankets and all. Light despite the pregnancy, burning with fever. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he carried her into sunlight. The gelding danced nervously. "Steady," Marcus murmured, getting boot in stirrup and hauling himself and his burden up in one smooth motion. He settled her in front of him, one arm around her middle, and turned toward home. 20 minutes felt like hours. She stirred once, striking weakly at his chest. "Easy," Marcus said, the tone he used with spooked horses. "I'm not the enemy, getting you to help." Something in his voice convinced her. She went still, heartbeat fluttering against his arm like a trapped bird. Marcus urged the gelding faster. The ranch house came into view, solid timber and stone, that Marcus's father had built 30 years back. 20 rooms that felt empty as a tomb most days. Sam O'Malley was in the yard, straightening from checking a wagon wheel. The old man's weathered face creased with concern when he saw what Marcus carried. "Boss," Sam said, moving quick despite 68 years and a limp from an arrow back in '65. What in God's name? Get Dr. Hayes, Marcus said, not stopping. Now, Sam, fast as you can. Sam didn't waste questions. He headed for the stable at a fast hobble, already shouting for someone to saddle a fresh horse. Marcus carried the woman through the front door, into the parlor, a room Sarah had decorated that he hadn't entered more than a dozen times since her death. He laid her on the burgundy sofa, grabbed cushions to prop her head and feet. She looked impossibly small, pale face, stark against rich fabric. Marcus stood feeling helpless hands hanging useless. Then training kicked in, the kind that kept men alive during the war when medical care was weeks away. Water. He went to the kitchen, pumped water into a bowl, grabbed clean towels. Back in the parlor he knelt and carefully wiped sweat and grime from her face and neck. Her skin burned under his hands. Her eyes opened, focusing with more clarity. Fear flickered there, but also exhaustion, resignation, the look of someone who'd run as far as they could and had nothing left. "Where am I?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Blackstone Ranch," Marcus said, continuing to work movements slow and unthreatening. "You're safe. Doctor's coming." "I can't pay," she said, shame in her voice that made his jaw tighten. "Didn't ask you to." He kept wiping her face. "Just stay still. You're burning up." "I fixed the roof," she said, eyes losing focus. "Didn't steal anything, just fixed what was broken." "I know," Marcus said, though he hadn't known until now. "I saw. Good work." A ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. Then her eyes closed and her breathing deepened into something between sleep and unconsciousness. Horses outside, boots on porch, Sam with Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the only physician within 50 miles. 45 widow iron-gray hair in a severe bun, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Marcus," she said, kneeling beside the sofa without preamble, setting her bag down. "What do we have?" "Found her in the Miller cabin. Fever pregnant alone. Don't know how long." Dr. Hayes's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking pulse, lifting eyelids, pressing gently on the swollen belly. She worked in silence for several minutes, while Marcus and Sam waited only sound the grandfather clock ticking. Finally, she sat back. "Malnourished, dehydrated, probably weeks. Fevers from infection, likely this wound." She indicated the bloodstain on the woman's arm. "But the baby seems strong, heart rate's good. Break the fever, get food in her, she should be fine. They both should." Something loosened in Marcus's chest. What does she need? Rest, fluids, food when she can take it. Clean bandages. Someone to watch her for the next day or two to make sure the fever breaks. Dr. Hayes stood brushing off her skirts. "I can stay a few hours, but I have other patients in town this evening." "I'll watch her," Marcus said, words out before he'd thought them through. Sam's eyebrows climbed. Dr. Hayes studied Marcus's face, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll show you what to do." She spent an hour teaching Marcus how to change bandages, check for worsening fever, get water and broth into someone barely conscious. Marcus absorbed it all with focused attention. When Dr. Hayes finally stood to leave, she paused at the door. "The town won't like this, Marcus. You know that." "The town can go to hell." A small smile tugged at her mouth. "That haunted cabin finally has a resident, though I suspect it's not haunted anymore." She tipped her head toward the parlor. "She's stronger than she looks. That baby, too. They're fighters." After she left, the house fell into peculiar silence, broken only by soft sounds of the woman's breathing. Sam busied himself in the kitchen, heating broth and making tea, giving Marcus space. Marcus pulled a chair close to the sofa and sat keeping watch. Afternoon light slanted golden through windows. The woman's face had lost some of its alarming pallor, breathing coming easier now. He found himself studying her, trying to understand her story from evidence before him. Quality of her dress suggested she'd once had means. Calluses on her hands told of recent hard work. The wedding ring, simple gold, spoke of a husband somewhere, though whether dead or absent he couldn't guess. Around 6 in the evening her eyes opened again. Real awareness this time. She looked at Marcus, at the room piecing together where she was, and what had happened. "I'm sorry," she said, voice still weak, but clearer. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "No trouble. What's your name?" She hesitated, weighing whether to trust him. Finally, May Sullivan. Sullivan. An Irish name married to a Chinese woman. That explained the accent, the mixed features. In 1888, Wyoming Territory, marrying across that line was brave, or foolish, or both. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Marcus Blackstone. You're at my ranch. You've been sick, but the doctor says you and the baby should be fine with rest and food." Tears sprang to her eyes at mention of the baby. "Thank you. I didn't know where else to go. The cabin was empty. I thought if I could just stay until the baby came." She nodded, hand moving to her belly. "I have nowhere else. They don't rent to women like me in towns. The road is long and I'm so tired." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a crack in armor he'd built over 7 years. He remembered Mary Miller's dying wish. He remembered Sarah, who had always had a soft heart for strays and lost causes. "You're not going anywhere tonight. Maybe not for a few days. Get your strength back first. I can't pay you. That's not what this is about." He stood. "The Miller cabin, that's where you've been. Yes, I fixed the roof, swept the floors, was going to plant a garden." "How'd you learn to do that?" A flicker of pride crossed her face. "My husband David, he was a carpenter before the mines. He taught me things." Was, past tense. Husband dead, May Sullivan alone, with a baby coming, and no place to call home. Marcus made his decision, the kind he was known for making quickly and sticking to. "You can stay in the cabin after you're well. Keep fixing it up. I've got cattle that graze that quarter. Someone watching the north herd would be useful." May stared, dark eyes wide. "You would let me stay work for you, not charity. You fix the place, you watch for strays, you've earned your keep. That's how it works on a ranch." Long moment of silence. She studied his face. Whatever she saw satisfied her. She nodded slowly. "I accept. Thank you, Mr. Blackstone." "Marcus, just Marcus." From the doorway, Sam's gruff voice. "Boss, you're doing right by Mary Miller's memory, and by your own heart, whether you know it or not." Marcus didn't respond. He turned and walked to his room, stood at the window looking over darkening land. He'd made a promise to Mary Miller 8 years ago. Today, he'd finally kept it. But he suspected he'd done something else too, something he couldn't quite name. He'd opened a door locked for 7 years. What would come through it, he didn't know. But for the first time since Sarah died, the silence didn't feel so heavy. Below, he could hear Sam humming in the kitchen, May's soft voice thanking him. Small sounds, human sounds, life sounds. That night, Marcus didn't sleep much. He kept checking on May, making sure fever wasn't spiking, adjusting blankets, leaving fresh water. Sam found him at 3 a.m, sitting in the hallway, back against the wall, keeping watch. "Go to bed, boss. I'll watch her." "I'm fine." "You're not." "But I understand. Been a long time since there was someone in this house who needed taking care of." 7 years. 7 years too long. Sam settled into a chair. "Go on. Get rest. I'll wake you if anything changes." Marcus pushed himself up, joints protesting. He paused at the parlor door, looking in at May's sleeping form. In low light, she looked impossibly young and vulnerable. "She's got no one, Sam. Pregnant, sick, alone. What kind of man would I be if I turned her away? The kind of man you're not. Now go to bed before you fall over." Marcus did as told, but even in his own bed, sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept circling back to the cabin, to May's hands, on those crude repairs, to the determination it must have taken. She was a survivor. That was clear. The question was, what was she surviving from? He'd find out tomorrow. Tonight she was safe under his roof. That would have to be enough. Outside, the Wyoming night spread vast and star-filled over Blackstone Ridge, and somewhere in that darkness, the Miller cabin stood patched and waiting, no longer haunted by ghosts, but by the very real hope of new life beginning. Morning came cold and bright. Marcus dressed quietly, pulling on work-worn clothes that had seen 1,000 days, just like this one would be. Before yesterday, before May Sullivan. The house smelled different. Coffee, yes, Sam's doing. but something else underneath. Life. The scent of another human inhabiting space empty too long. Sam was in the kitchen, whisking eggs with unnecessary vigor. The old man glanced up. "She's awake. Fever broke around 5. Stubborn woman. Insisted on getting up. I helped her to the washroom." Sam poured eggs into sizzling butter. "She asked about you. Wanted to know if you were angry." "I'm not angry. Didn't think you were. But she's scared. Been running a long time, I'd wager. Doesn't trust easy." "What else did she tell you?" "Not much. Close-mouthed, that one. But I got the sense her husband's been dead a while. Year, maybe 2. She's been moving since." Sam scraped eggs onto a plate, added toasted bread. "She mentioned Rock Springs once, then changed subject real quick. You know what happened there." Marcus knew. Everyone in Wyoming Territory knew. Summer of 1885. White miners turned on Chinese laborers working the coal mines. The riot that followed was brutal. 28 Chinese workers killed, 15 wounded, dozens of homes burned. Survivors scattered, trying to disappear into landscape that didn't want them. If May had been in Rock Springs, if her husband died there, it explained the wariness in her eyes, the way she'd reached for that hammer, the careful way she spoke. "I'll take the food in," Marcus said. "Boss, you sure about this town's going to have opinions? Victor Hayes especially." Victor Hayes. Marcus's jaw tightened. The town banker who'd been trying to buy pieces of Blackstone Ranch for 3 years, always with a smile that never reached cold gray eyes. "Victor Hayes can mind his own business." "You know he won't. Man's got his eye on the North Quarter. If he finds out someone's living in the Miller cabin on land he'll make trouble. Let him try." Marcus took the plate. May was sitting on the sofa's edge, bare feet just touching floor hands folded in lap. She'd washed her face, smoothed her hair back. In morning light he could see she was younger than he'd thought, not yet 30, with delicate features that would be pretty without the hollows under her eyes, and 2 sharp cheekbones. She needed feeding up. "Mrs. Sullivan," Marcus said. She looked up quickly, relief crossing her face. "Brought breakfast." "You didn't have to. I still can't pay for any of this." "No one's asking you to pay." He set the plate on the low table, pulled up the chair from last night, keeping distance. "It's just breakfast, not a contract." That ghost of a smile. She picked up the fork and began to eat slowly at first, then with more enthusiasm as her body remembered real food. She left the second piece of bread, wrapping it carefully in the napkin. "For later, in case I get hungry." The gesture told Marcus more than words could about how long she'd gone without regular meals, how ingrained the habit of hoarding food had become. It made something hot and angry stir in his chest. Righteous anger, Sarah would have called it, the kind that demanded action. "Mrs. Sullivan?" "May," she interrupted. "If I'm to stay even for a few days, please call me May. Mrs. Sullivan was my mother-in-law, and she's been dead 3 years." "May. You said your husband was David Sullivan, from Liverpool." "Yes, he came to America at 20 looking for work, found it in San Francisco, then the mines." Her hands moved to her belly again. "We married 4 years ago. California allowed it. Father Murphy performed the ceremony." "Father Murphy from Copper Falls." "No, a different Father Murphy in San Francisco." She paused. "David died 2 years ago. Mine collapse in Rock Springs. They said accident, but the Chinese workers knew better. Support beams had been sawed partway through." Marcus's hands tightened on his knees. "The massacre." "Before the massacre. David died 3 months before. He tried to tell supervisors about safety problems. They called him a troublemaker, a Chinese lover, said he was making up lies." Her voice remained calm, but Marcus heard the pain underneath. "When the riot happened, I was already gone. I left Rock Springs the day after they buried David. I knew what was coming." "Where did you go?" "San Francisco first, back to the restaurant where I'd worked before marrying. But the owner wanted more than just work. When I refused, he accused me of stealing from the till, $200. I took my wages, what I was owed $150, and I ran." "There's a warrant," Marcus said, understanding. May met his eyes squarely. "I am not a thief, Marcus. I took only what I had earned. But his word against mine, white businessman against Chinese woman, no question who would be believed." So you headed east. I walked. 8 weeks from San Francisco to here. Working when I could, sleeping where I could. 2 months pregnant when I left. Didn't show yet. Made it easier to find work. Her hand moved over her belly. By the time I reached Wyoming, I was 6 months along and winter was coming. I couldn't keep walking. I needed shelter. Found the Miller cabin by accident. Saw it was empty, saw it had good bones under the rot. I thought if I could fix it enough to keep cold out, I could stay until the baby came. After that, she shrugged. Hadn't thought that far ahead. Marcus was quiet, processing everything. The timeline fit. The desperation fit. The skills fit. She wasn't lying, he'd stake his life on it, but whether the law would see it that way was another question. That warrant. If someone came looking, if the law showed up, you'd be arrested. Yes, but no one is looking. It's been 2 years. A Chinese woman accused of stealing is not important enough to chase across 3 territories. Probably right. But Victor Hayes, if he got wind of her situation, would find a way to use it. The cabin. You said you wanted to stay there. I meant what I said last night. You can stay, you can work, but May, that land, someone's been trying to buy it. Man named Victor Hayes. He's not going to like finding someone living there. Is he dangerous? Not with his own hands, but he's got influence in town. He's not above using the law to get what he wants. If he decides you're an obstacle, he'll find a way to move you. Then I'll move when I must. But not before the baby is born. I've run far enough. Steel in her voice. Determination Marcus recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. She wasn't going to scare easy. Good. She'd need that stubbornness. A sound from the doorway. Sam stood there, expression carefully neutral in the way that meant he'd been eavesdropping. "Boss," Sam said, "we got company. Victor Hayes just rode up with Sheriff Curtis." Every muscle in Marcus's body tensed. Too fast. News had traveled too fast. Someone in town had seen him ride in with May yesterday and gone straight to Victor. "Stay here," Marcus said to May, standing. "Let me handle this." "No," May said, steel again. "If they're here because of me, I should be there. I won't hide." Marcus wanted to argue, but the set of her jaw told him it was pointless. "All right, but let me do the talking first." They walked onto the front porch together, May moving carefully, one hand on Marcus's arm for support. Sheriff Wade Curtis was dismounting, a big man in his 50s with drooping mustache and tired eyes from seeing too much of humanity's worst. Victor Hayes stayed mounted, sitting his horse, like height gave him authority. Victor was younger than Marcus by 5 years, built lean and elegant in a way that made Marcus think of snakes, dressed too well for a morning ride suit, spotless boots polished. A man who cared about appearances. "Marcus," Sheriff Curtis said, touching his hat brim. "Morning. Sorry to bother you so early." "Wade, what brings you out?" "Just a few questions. Heard you brought someone back from the Miller place yesterday. Wanted to make sure everything was all right." "Everything's fine." Marcus has always had a soft heart for strays, Victor said from atop his hoarse voice, smooth and pleasant and poisonous. "Though I'm surprised to see one making herself at home so quickly." May stiffened, but said nothing, smart knowing when to hold her tongue. "This is Mrs. May Sullivan," Marcus said, emphasizing the Mrs. "She's been staying at the Miller cabin. She'll be continuing to do so. She's working for me now, watching the north herd and maintaining the property." Sheriff Curtis's eyebrows rose. "That right? You got papers for that. I'll draw up a contract today. Mrs. Sullivan is a widow. Her husband was David Sullivan from Liverpool, died in the Rock Springs mines 2 years back." "Sullivan?" the sheriff repeated, working through it. "Irish name, white man's name." That changed things. A Chinese woman married to a white man had more protection under law, though not by much. If she's widowed and working for you, that's her business and yours. Sheriff Curtis looked at May directly. "Ma'am, are you here of your own free will? No one forcing you?" "I am here by choice," May said, voice clear and firm despite her weakened state. "Mr. Blackstone has been nothing but kind. I asked to stay." The sheriff nodded slowly. "All right then, good enough for me." "It's not good enough for me," Victor said. That cabin is on land I've been negotiating to purchase. Marcus has been putting me off for 3 years, and suddenly there's a convenient occupant. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Sheriff, life doesn't run on your schedule, Victor, Marcus said, voice dropping to the tone that made smart men step back. Perhaps not. But the law does. Sheriff, I want that cabin inspected. I want verification that Mrs. Sullivan's marriage is legal and that she has a right to be in Wyoming territory at all. Sheriff Curtis sighed, caught between duty and inclination. Marcus, I'm sorry, but he's within his rights. If she's living on disputed land, it's not disputed. It's my land. Has been for 8 years since I bought it from Thomas Miller's estate. You were there at the auction, Wade. I remember, but Victor's been making offers, which I've refused, every single one. The land's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price, Victor said, all teeth. But if you insist on keeping it, I insist on knowing exactly who's living there and under what arrangement, especially if she's Chinese. I'm British, May said suddenly. Every eye turned to her. My mother was Chinese. My father was English, from London. I was born in Hong Kong, which makes me a British subject. My marriage to David Sullivan was legal under California law. I have papers to prove all of this. Marcus looked at her in surprise. She'd never mentioned the British connection, but if true, it gave her protection. Not much, but some. Britain had treaties with the United States. British subjects had certain rights. You have papers? Sheriff Curtis asked, sounding hopeful. Yes, in my trunk at the cabin. Marriage certificate, my husband's death certificate, my father's papers proving his British citizenship, and my birth in Hong Kong. Victor's smile slipped. Convenient that they're not here. I'll ride out and get them, Sam said from the doorway, making everyone jump. Take me 30 minutes round trip. You gentlemen care to wait? Sheriff Curtis looked relieved. That would settle things nicely. It would settle nothing, Victor snapped. Those papers could be forged. You calling me a liar? May asked, ice in her voice. I'm saying it's suspicious. A woman appears out of nowhere, claims marriage to a white man, just happens to have all the right papers, and just happens to be living on land I want to buy. You'll forgive me for being skeptical. I'll forgive you nothing, May said flatly. You don't know me. You don't know what I've survived to get here. You see a Chinese face and you see a lie. But I am here. I am legal, and I am not leaving. The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend steel. Marcus felt pride surge through him. This woman, barely able to stand, was facing down 2 men on horseback and a sheriff without flinching. Sam, Marcus said quietly, go get the papers. Sam disappeared. They heard him ride out moments later. The wait was uncomfortable. Victor remained mounted, face set in cold anger. Sheriff Curtis stood by his horse, wishing he was anywhere else. Marcus and May stayed on the porch. Marcus could feel May's arm trembling where she held him, strength finally flagging. You should sit, Marcus murmured. I'll stand. If I sit now, I'm showing weakness. Smart woman. Stubborn woman. Sam returned in 30 minutes, riding hard, a small wooden box under one arm. He dismounted and brought it straight to May, who took it with shaking hands and opened the latch. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were documents. May pulled them out one by one, handing them to Sheriff Curtis. Marriage certificate from San Francisco, dated 4 years prior. Death certificate for David Sullivan from Rock Springs. Birth certificate for May Chen, born Hong Kong, 1859. Father, listed as Robert Chen, British merchant. And finally, a faded letter bearing British government seals confirming Robert Chen's citizenship. Sheriff Curtis examined each, carefully holding them to light, checking for forgery signs. Marcus watched Victor's face darken as it became clear the papers were legitimate. These look real to me, Sheriff Curtis said finally. Mrs. Sullivan, I apologize for the trouble. You're legal to be here. If Marcus says you're working for him, that's between you and him. This isn't over, Victor said, voice tight with rage. That cabin is still on land I want. I'll find another way. There is no other way, Marcus said, stepping forward off the porch. He moved slowly, deliberately, until he stood beside Victor's horse, looking up. I've told you no a dozen times. The answer hasn't changed. It's not going to change. That land is mine. If Mrs. Sullivan wants to live there and work for me, that's what's going to happen. And Victor." He let his voice drop to barely above a whisper. "If I find out you've been harassing her, if I hear you've been spreading rumors or making trouble for her in town, you and I are going to have a very different kind of conversation. Am I clear?" For a moment, Marcus thought Victor might actually strike him. The man's hand twitched toward his jacket where Marcus knew he kept a small pistol. But Victor wasn't that stupid, not with a sheriff watching, not on Marcus Blackstone's own property. "Crystal clear," Victor finally said. He yanked his horse's head around and spurred away, disappearing in a cloud of dust and anger. Sheriff Curtis let out a long breath. "Marcus, you've made an enemy today. Victor's not going to let this go. Victor's been my enemy since the day I refused to let him buy Sarah's piano. This doesn't change anything." "Maybe not." The sheriff looked at May, expression softening. "Ma'am, I hope you know what you're getting into. This town, it's not always kind to folks who are different." "I know," May said simply. "But I have nowhere else to go, and I won't run any more." Sheriff Curtis nodded, swung into his saddle. "Good luck to you both then. You're going to need it." He rode off. Marcus, May, and Sam stood in the yard. Morning sun climbed higher, burning off the last chill. Somewhere cattle lowed. A hawk cried overhead. Marcus felt May's weight sag against him. She'd been holding herself upright through sheer will. "All right," he said quietly. "You've proven your point. Now let's get you inside before you fall over." "Did I do well?" she asked, something almost childlike in the question. "You did better than well. You faced down Victor Hayes and came out standing. That's more than most men in this territory can say." Sam helped them get May back to the sofa. This time she didn't protest when Marcus insisted she lie down. Her eyes were already closing, exhaustion claiming her. "She's got spine," Sam said quietly as they left the parlor. "Reminds me of Sarah that way." Marcus didn't answer, because Sam was right, and acknowledging it felt like betrayal of Sarah's memory, even though he knew Sarah would have wanted exactly this. They went to the kitchen, where Sam poured coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. "So, what now?" "Now we make this official. I need to draw up that employment contract, and I need to ride out to the Miller cabin, see what kind of shape it's really in. If she's going to be living there, I want to make sure it's safe. Boss, you know what you're doing right, taking on a pregnant widow with warrants chasing her and Victor Hayes, gunning for her land. That's a lot of trouble for a woman you just met." Marcus looked at Sam, at the old man who'd been his friend for 20 years, who'd helped him bury Sarah, and had never once suggested Marcus should move on. "Mary Miller made me promise not to let that cabin go to ruin, made me promise it would be a home again. This is about more than a promise to a dead woman, maybe, but it's a start." He spent the morning working on the contract, writing out, in careful legal language, that May Sullivan was employed as ranch hand and property caretaker, permitted to live in the Miller cabin rent-free, in exchange for maintaining the property and monitoring the North herd. He included wages to $50 a month, which was more than generous but would make the arrangement unquestionably legal. When he finished, he read it over twice, making sure there were no loopholes Victor could exploit. Then he took it to May, who was awake again, sitting up and sipping more of Sam's perpetual tea. "This is the contract," Marcus said, handing her the paper. "Read it carefully. If you're not comfortable with anything, we can change it." May read slowly, lips moving slightly as she worked through the legal language. When she finished, she looked up with something like wonder. $50 a month. Marcus, that's too much." "It's what the job is worth. You'll be doing real work. You'll earn every penny." "I can't sign this. In 3 months, I'll have a baby. I won't be able to work as much. It wouldn't be fair to you." Marcus pulled up a chair and sat leaning forward to look her in the eye. "May, listen to me. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a job, yes, but I'm also offering something else. A place, a home, security. You need that for your child. Let me give it to you." "Why," her voice broke slightly, "you don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you do this?" How could he explain it? The promise to Mary Miller was part of it. The memory of Sarah, who would have brought May home without hesitation. But there was something else. Something he couldn't articulate. When he'd found May in that cabin burning with fever and alone, something had shifted in his chest like ice breaking after a long winter. He'd felt purpose again, not his own need but hers, and meeting it had awakened something he thought died with Sarah. "Because it's right," he finally said. "Because you need help and I can give it. Because that cabin was sitting empty, and that's wrong when someone needs a home. Pick whichever reason makes sense to you." May was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. Whatever she saw there satisfied her. She reached for the pen Sam had left on the table and signed her name at the bottom in a clear, educated hand. Machen Sullivan. "Thank you," she said simply. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't." That afternoon he saddled his horse and rode out to the Miller cabin. In daylight, with a clear head and time to really look, he could see the extent of May's work. The roof patched with bark and tin. Chimney cleared stones, reset, door rehung. Inside, the place had been swept clean, old furniture mended, new pieces cobbled together from scraps. The trunk sat in the corner, battered but sturdy. Marcus didn't open it. That was her privacy, her past. But he noticed the careful way everything was arranged. The garden plot she'd started to dig, the pile of firewood she'd been building, one stick at a time. She'd been preparing to survive, to endure, to build a life out of nothing. Marcus walked the perimeter, noting what needed to be done. Real shingles for the roof, new windows, proper chinking between logs, sturdier door, all doable, all within his means. He'd start tomorrow. For today he just stood in the yard and looked out over the valley, thinking about promises kept and new beginnings and the strange way life could surprise you when you least expected it. Behind him the cabin waited, patient and steady, ready to become a home again. 3 weeks passed like water flowing over stones, steady and reshaping everything in its path. May grew stronger. The fever had broken and stayed broken. Color returned to her cheeks. The hollows under her eyes filled in as Sam's cooking did its work. She moved through the ranch house with increasing confidence, no longer the frightened woman Marcus had found curled on a pallet, but someone finding her footing in a world that had tried hard to knock her down. Marcus found himself adjusting his days around her presence. Morning coffee became a shared ritual, the two of them sitting at the kitchen table while Sam cooked breakfast, speaking little, but somehow saying enough. She asked questions about the ranch, about the cattle, about Wyoming winters. He answered them all, surprised to find himself talking more than he had in years. She was curious about everything. How many head of cattle did he run? What breed? Where did they graze in summer versus winter? Questions that showed intelligence, a mind that wanted to understand the world she'd found herself in. And she was useful. Despite her pregnancy, she insisted on helping. She took over mending her stitches, small and precise, repairing months of neglect in Marcus's clothes. She reorganized the kitchen in ways that made Sam grudgingly admit were improvements. She showed them how to make dumplings from scratch, a recipe her mother had taught her, and even Sam's skepticism melted when he tasted them. But she hadn't moved back to the Miller cabin yet. Marcus kept finding reasons to delay it. The roof needed more work. The windows weren't secure enough. Winter supplies needed to be stored there first. All true, but also all excuses. The truth was, the house felt different with her in it. Alive in a way it hadn't been since Sarah died. Sam noticed, of course. Sam noticed everything. "You're stalling," the old man said one morning while May was still asleep. "Cabin's been ready for a week now. It needs more work. It needs a resident. And she needs her independence. You know that, boss." Marcus did know. But knowing and acting were different things. The decision was made for him on a Sunday morning when May came downstairs dressed in the burgundy wool dress Sam had helped her sew from the fabric Marcus had bought in town that first week. She'd altered it to accommodate her growing belly, and the deep red color made her skin glow. "I want to go to church," she announced. "If that's permitted." Marcus looked up from his coffee, surprised. "You don't need my permission." But I need your escort. A Chinese woman showing up alone at a white church in Wyoming territory. She smiled slightly. I may be brave, Marcus, but I'm not stupid. Sam chuckled from the stove. She's got you there, boss. So Marcus found himself an hour later helping May up into the buckboard wagon, Sam sitting in the back, all three of them dressed in their Sunday best and heading toward Copper Falls. It was the first time May had been off the ranch since that confrontation with Victor Hayes and Sheriff Curtis. The town sat in a valley 15 miles east, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a central square. The church stood at the north end, white-painted timber, with a modest steeple and a bell that was ringing as they approached, calling the faithful to worship. People were gathering on the steps, dressed in their Sunday finest, greeting neighbors and exchanging gossip. The conversations died as Marcus drove up, every eye turned to the wagon, to May. Marcus felt her stiffen beside him, but she kept her head high, her face composed. He set the brake and climbed down, then offered his hand to help her descend. She took it without hesitation, her grip firm and steady. They walked toward the church entrance, Sam a step behind. The crowd parted like water around a stone, people stepping back staring. Marcus heard whispers starting, saw heads turning. Then a figure pushed through the crowd. Father Patrick Murphy, 55 years old, with a shock of white hair and the broad shoulders of a man who'd done hard labor before finding his calling. He was Irish, had come to America at 20, fleeing the famine, and his accent was still thick as peat. Marcus Blackstone, Father Murphy said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. It's been too long since we've seen you at Mass. And who is this lovely lady? Father Murphy. This is Mrs. May Sullivan. She's working at my ranch, staying in the Miller cabin. May, this is Father Murphy. He runs this church and half the charity work in Copper Falls. Father Murphy's eyes, sharp and blue as winter sky, took in May's condition, her mixed heritage, the quality of her dress. Marcus saw understanding dawn, saw the priest make a decision in the space of a heartbeat. Mrs. Sullivan, Father Murphy said, taking her hand in both of his, you're most welcome here. Any soul seeking comfort in the Lord's house is welcome, regardless of where they come from or what they look like. That's what I preach, and by God, that's what I mean. His voice had risen on the last sentence, carrying to every person in the square. It was a challenge and a declaration both. Marcus felt gratitude surge through him. Thank you, Father, May said quietly. My husband David was Catholic. Irish like yourself. I promised him I'd raise our child in the faith. Then you honor his memory, and I honor you for it, Father Murphy said. He turned to the crowd, still holding May's hand. Shall we begin? The Lord waits for no man, and I've got a sermon about charity that some of you need to hear. There was nervous laughter at that. The crowd began moving into the church. Marcus felt the tension ease slightly, though not disappear. As they filed in, he saw Victor Hayes standing near the back, face dark with anger. Their eyes met briefly. Victor's gaze promised this wasn't over. Inside the church was simple but beautiful. Wooden pews, polished smooth by generations of worshipers, stained glass windows that caught the morning sun and painted the congregation in colors, the smell of candle wax and old hymnal books. They sat near the middle Marcus, on the aisle May, between him and Sam. As the service began, Marcus felt her relax slightly. The familiar rhythms of Catholic Mass seemed to comfort her, and when it came time to sing, her voice rose clear and true, singing in Latin, with an accent that spoke of proper education somewhere in her past. People noticed. Marcus saw heads turning, saw the surprise on faces. A Chinese woman who knew Catholic liturgy, who sang like she'd been doing it all her life. It didn't fit their expectations, and that was good. Expectations were walls, and walls could be broken down. Father Murphy's sermon was about the Samaritan woman at the well, about Jesus speaking to an outcast and offering her living water while his own disciples stood shocked that he would lower himself to address such a person. The priest's words were pointed, his gaze sweeping the congregation with deliberate weight. Our Lord didn't ask about her papers. Father Murphy said, his voice ringing through the church, didn't check her lineage or demand proof of her worthiness. He saw a soul in need and he offered grace. That's what we're called to do. That's what this church stands for. If you've got a problem with that, the door's behind you, and don't let it hit you on the way out. There was shocked silence. Then from the front row a woman stood. She was perhaps 50, dressed in a simple but well-made dress, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. Marcus recognized her as Sarah Curtis, the sheriff's wife. "Father Murphy is right," Sarah Curtis said, her voice steady. "This town was built by people from everywhere. Irish Germans, Swedes, Chinese railroad workers, Mexican ranch hands. We all came here looking for something better. When did we forget that—" She turned and walked down the aisle, stopped at their pew, and looked directly at May. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Sarah Curtis. My husband Wade is the sheriff. After the service, I'd be honored if you'd join me and some of the other ladies for tea at my house. We meet every Sunday. It would be good to have a new face." May looked stunned. Thank you, Mrs. Curtis. I would be honored." Sarah smiled, nodded to Marcus, and returned to her seat. In the silence that followed, two more women stood and walked over, introducing themselves quietly. Margaret O'Brien, a widow who ran the general store. Patricia Gonzalez, whose husband owned the livery. Both offered invitations to tea, both ignored the continued whispers around them. Father Murphy, watching from the pulpit, smiled like a man who'd just won a battle. "Now that we've established what Christian charity looks like, let's pray." The rest of the service passed in a blur. Marcus found himself relaxing, some tight knot in his chest loosening. This was what Sarah would have wanted, a community coming together instead of pushing away. Not everyone, certainly. He could see the hard faces, the closed expressions, the people who would never accept May. But enough. Enough good people to make a difference. After the service, Sarah Curtis was true to her word. She gathered May and the other ladies and swept them off toward her house, a modest but well-kept place near the church. Marcus watched them go, May looking back once with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but also fear, as if she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "That went better than expected," Sam said beside him. "Victor's going to push back. You saw his face. Let him. He's got less power than he thinks, especially when the church is against him." They were walking toward the wagon when a voice called out behind them, "Blackstone, a word." Marcus turned. Victor Hayes was approaching, two men flanking him. Marcus recognized them as ranch hands from the Hayes property, hired muscle more than working cowboys. "Victor," Marcus said evenly, "something on your mind. That woman. She can't stay in this town. You're making a mistake." "That's my business, not yours." "It's everyone's business when you're harboring a criminal." Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. "What are you talking about?" Victor smiled, and it was the smile of a snake that had just cornered its prey. "I had an investigator look into her past. Did she tell you about the warrant out of San Francisco theft? $200. That makes her a fugitive, Marcus. And you're aiding and abetting." "She took her own wages. The charge is fraudulent. That's for a court to decide. I've already sent word to the marshal in Cheyenne. He'll be here within the week to take her into custody." The world seemed to narrow to a single point. Marcus was aware of Sam tensing beside him, of the two hired men shifting their weight hands moving toward guns, of the people still lingering outside the church watching. "You've made a mistake, Victor," Marcus said quietly. "The only mistake was yours, thinking you could protect her. Face it, Marcus, she's going to jail. And without her occupying that cabin, you'll have no reason not to sell me the land. It's simple business." Marcus moved fast. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, grabbed Victor by his expensive coat, and slammed him back against the church wall, hard enough to rattle the man's teeth. The 2 ranch hands went for their guns, but Sam already had his pistol out, aimed and steady despite his age. "Don't," Sam said calmly. "I'm old, but my eyes are still good. I won't miss." Marcus held Victor, pinned his face inches from the bankers. "You listen to me very carefully. May Sullivan is under my protection. You try to have her arrested on a false charge, I will make it my life's mission to destroy you. I'll call in every debt pull, every string, use every connection I have. I'll dig into your business dealings until I find what you're hiding, because men like you are always hiding something. And when I find it, I'll bury you with it. Do you understand me?" Victor's face had gone pale, then red. "You're threatening me in front of witnesses. I'm making you a promise, the same way you made May a threat. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to send another telegram to that marshal. You're going to tell him the matter is resolved and no action is needed. If I see a marshal show up in Copper Falls asking about May Sullivan, I'll know it came from you, and there will be consequences. You can't tell me what to do." Marcus tightened his grip. "I'm not telling you. I'm showing you what happens when you threaten someone I've given my word to protect. Last chance, Victor. Call off your dogs or become my enemy in truth, not just in business." For a long moment they stared at each other. Marcus saw fear flicker behind Victor's eyes, saw the man realize he'd pushed too far. Victor wasn't stupid. Marcus Blackstone had power in this territory, money and connections that Victor couldn't match. And everyone knew Marcus was a man who kept his promises, good or bad. "Fine," Victor finally said. "I'll send the telegram, but this isn't over, Marcus. That land should be mine." "It's not. It never will be. Make your peace with that." Marcus released him. Victor straightened his coat, shot one last venomous look, and stalked away, his 2 hired men following like whipped dogs. Sam holstered his pistol. "That was a hell of a thing, boss, threatening a man outside his own church." "He threatened May first." "He did. But now he knows you're serious. Question is what happens when he decides to go around you instead of through you." Marcus had no answer for that. They walked to the wagon in silence. Around them people were dispersing, heading home or to Sunday dinners. Marcus saw the looks they were getting, mixture of shock and approval and fear. Word would spread fast about what had just happened. They picked up May at Sarah Curtis's house 2 hours later. She emerged looking lighter, somehow smiling in a way Marcus hadn't seen before, real and unguarded. Sarah walked her to the wagon, the 2 women talking quietly like old friends. "Thank you for bringing her, Marcus," Sarah said. "She's a remarkable woman. We'd like to see her again next Sunday if that's acceptable." "She doesn't need my permission," Marcus said. "She's free to come and go as she pleases." "Perhaps. But in this town having your backing means something. Wade told me what Victor said he'd do. I'm glad you stopped him. Word travels fast." "It does. And most of it is approval for what that's worth." Sarah looked up at May, who was already seated in the wagon. "You're welcome in this house any time, May. Don't let anyone tell you different." On the ride home, May was quiet for a long time. Then, as the ranch came into view, she spoke. "Sarah Curtis told me what Victor Hayes said, about the marshal, about having me arrested." Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "I handled it by threatening him, by making a promise. There's a difference. With me, no." More silence. Then, "Thank you, Marcus. No one has ever stood up for me like that, not since David died. You're part of this ranch now. That means something." "What does it mean?" Marcus thought about how to answer that, about promises and protection, and the strange way his life had changed in 3 weeks, about how the empty house didn't feel empty anymore, and how that terrified him almost as much as it comforted him. "It means you're not alone," he finally said. "Not anymore." She reached over and placed her hand on his arm just for a moment. The touch was light, but it burned through his sleeve like a brand. Then she withdrew, looking out at the passing landscape, and said nothing more. But something had shifted between them. They both felt it. The next 2 weeks were deceptively peaceful. May finally moved back to the Miller cabin, though Marcus made sure it was fully stocked and weatherproofed first. He rode out every evening to check on her officially, to inspect the property and cattle unofficially, because he couldn't seem to stop himself. She was nesting, Sam called it, making the cabin truly hers. Curtains appeared in the windows sewn from fabric Sarah Curtis had gifted her. A small garden took shape in the yard, herbs and vegetables that would be ready by late summer. She'd found wildflowers on one of her walks and planted them along the path, little spots of color that made Marcus think of Sarah. They fell into a routine. Marcus would arrive as the sun was setting, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes just checking in. May would make tea, they would sit on the porch she'd repaired and cleaned, and they would talk. Really talk about things that mattered and things that didn't. She told him about Hong Kong, about growing up between two worlds, never quite fitting in either. About her father, the English merchant, who'd loved her mother enough to defy convention, but not enough to bring them back to England, where they would have been outcast. About learning to read and write in 3 languages, about music lessons and poetry, and a childhood that prepared her for a life she would never have. Marcus told her about Sarah, something he'd never done with anyone. About how they'd met, about the 5 years they'd tried for a child, about the joy when she finally conceived and the horror of losing them both. About the 7 years of silence and emptiness that followed. "You loved her very much," May said one evening, watching the stars come out. "I did." "Do you still?" "Always. But it's different now. Less raw. More like a scar than a wound." May nodded, understanding. "I loved David that way. Still do. But I'm learning that love doesn't have to be exclusive. That hearts have more room than we think." Something in the way she said it made Marcus's breath catch. But before he could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Marcus was on his feet instantly, hand on his gun. A rider burst into the yard, horse lathered and blowing. One of Marcus's ranch hands, a young man named Tommy. "Boss," Tommy gasped. "Fire! The north pasture. Lightning strike, we think. It's spreading fast toward the summer range. Sam sent me to get you." Marcus was moving before Tommy finished speaking. "May, stay here. Lock the door. I can help." "No. You're 7 months pregnant. Stay. Here." He was on his horse before she could argue, following Tommy back toward the ranch at a gallop. Behind them, May stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching them disappear into darkness. The fire was bad. Marcus could see the glow from 2 miles away, orange and red against the black sky. By the time he reached the north pasture, Sam had organized the ranch hands into bucket brigades, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. The grass was dry from a week without rain, and the wind was pushing the flames toward the forested ridge where the summer grazing land began. If the fire reached those trees, they'd lose everything. "We need to create a fire break," Marcus shouted over the roar of flames. "Cut a line between here and the trees. Everyone who's not on the buckets, start cutting grass. Make it 20 feet wide." They worked through the night, desperate and exhausted. The smoke was choking the heat, intense enough to blister skin. Marcus swung a scythe until his arms screamed, cutting grass and throwing it back away from the fire line. Around him, men did the same, racing against the wind and the flames. Dawn was breaking when they finally got it under control. The fire break had held. The flames had burned themselves out against bare earth and lack of fuel. The north pasture was a blackened wasteland, still smoking, but the summer range was safe. Marcus stood among the ruins, covered in soot and ash, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. They'd saved the ranch, barely. "Boss," Sam said, appearing at his elbow with a canteen of water, "we did it." Marcus took the canteen and drank deeply. "How much did we lose?" 200 acres of good grazing land, 3 line shacks, no cattle, thank God. They'd already moved to summer range last week. And the men, burns mostly minor. Tommy twisted his ankle jumping a ditch, but everyone's alive. Marcus nodded, too tired to feel relief yet. That would come later. Right now he just wanted to fall down and sleep for a week. Then he saw the rider approaching from the south. Small figure on a bay mare he recognized as the one he'd given May to use for emergencies. His heart jumped into his throat. May rode up and dismounted with difficulty, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. She was dressed in men's work clothes, her face set with determination. "What are you doing here?" Marcus demanded. "I told you to stay at the cabin." "I brought food," she said calmly, gesturing to the saddlebags. "And medical supplies. I thought you might need both. May, you shouldn't have ridden out here, not in your condition. Would you rather your men starve and bleed because I followed orders?" She started unpacking the saddlebags, revealing bread, cheese, dried meat, and a considerable collection of bandages and salves. "I'm here. Accept it." Sam was grinning. "Stubborn as you, boss. I like her." Despite everything, Marcus felt a laugh bubbling up. Exhaustion and relief and something else, something warm that had nothing to do with the dying fire. "Fine, but you're not doing any heavy work. Understood?" "Understood. I'll just feed your men and patch their wounds. Very light work." She did exactly that, moving among the exhausted ranch hands with water and food and gentle efficiency as she cleaned burns and wrapped blisters. Marcus watched her work and felt something settle in his chest. This was what partnership looked like, what family looked like, not just accepting help, but offering it even when it was hard, even when it was scary. By mid-morning, everyone had been fed and treated. May had organized the men into rest shifts, making sure no one pushed themselves into collapse. She'd somehow produced coffee hot and strong that tasted like salvation. Marcus found her sitting on a blackened log, one hand on her belly, face pale with exhaustion. "You should rest," he said, sitting beside her. "So should you." "In a bit. I need to assess the damage first, figure out what needs to be rebuilt." "The cabin," May said quietly. "It's untouched. The fire went the other direction." "I know. I checked at first light." He paused. "Were you scared being there alone while this was happening?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But then I thought, what would Marcus do? And the answer was, he'd find a way to help. So I did." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, hair coming loose from its braid face, smudged with soot, dress too large and work-worn. 7 months pregnant and exhausted, and still beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with spirit. "May," he said, and his voice came out rougher than intended. "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him, dark eyes questioning. "That first day, when I found you in the cabin, I thought I was keeping a promise to Mary Miller, making sure her home went to someone who needed it. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about promises to the dead and started being about promises to the living." "What kind of promises?" "The kind where I want to make sure you're safe, always. Not just now, not just until the baby comes, but beyond that. Permanent." He took a breath. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving David. I know I'm probably twice your age and set in my ways and not much to look at. But May, this house, this ranch, it's come alive again since you've been here. I've come alive again, and I don't want to go back to how it was before." She was quiet for so long, Marcus thought he'd made a terrible mistake. Then she reached out and took his hand, her fingers small and strong in his. "You're 43, Marcus, and I'm 29. You're not twice my age, though you like to say you are." She smiled slightly. "And you're more to look at than you think, but that's not what matters. What matters is that you see me, not Chinese May or Widow May or poor unfortunate May, just me, the person I am. David saw me that way. No one else has since he died, until you." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying it's not too soon. I'm saying I feel the same way, though. I've been afraid to admit it even to myself. I'm saying that when this baby comes, I want it to have a family. A real one. Not just me surviving alone, but us building something together." She paused. "But Marcus, I need to be honest. There's still the warrant. Victor Hayes might have backed off, but that doesn't make it disappear. If it ever catches up to me, if someone decides to enforce it, I could be taken away. I could go to prison. I won't let you tie yourself to that risk without knowing it." "I know the risk," Marcus said. "I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you." She leaned against him, then her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that while the sun climbed higher and the smoke slowly cleared. Around them, ranch hands were beginning the work of cleanup, burning what couldn't be saved, salvaging what could. The smell of ash hung heavy, but underneath it, Marcus could smell May's hair soap and wildflowers, and it was the smell of home. "We should get you back to the cabin," he said finally. "You need real rest." "So do you." "I will, after I see you settled." They rode back together, Marcus leading May, following, both too tired for more words but not needing them. When they reached the cabin, Marcus helped her down from the horse and walked her to the door. "I meant what I said," he told her, "about wanting this to be permanent. But I know you need time to think, to be sure. I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready, we'll talk about what permanent looks like." May reached up and touched his face, her hand gentle on his ash-stained cheek. "I'm ready now, Marcus. I've been ready. I was just waiting for you to be ready too." Then she went inside, leaving Marcus standing in the doorway, feeling like he'd been struck by lightning. Good lightning. The kind that illuminated everything and showed you the path forward. He rode back to the ranch in a daze. Sam took one look at his face and started laughing. "Congratulations, boss. Took you long enough?" "I didn't ask her to marry me. Not yet, but you will. And she'll say yes. Anyone with eyes could see that coming." Marcus couldn't argue. He went to his room, stripped off his filthy clothes, washed the soot from his skin, and fell into bed. He slept for 12 hours straight, and for the first time in 7 years, he dreamed not of Sarah dying, but of May living, of a baby's cry, of a house filled with noise and light and family. When he woke, it was dark outside. He dressed and went downstairs, following the sound of voices to the kitchen. Sam was there, and Dr. Elizabeth Hayes and May sitting at the table with a cup of tea. "There he is," Sam said, "a Sleeping Beauty awakes." "What's going on?" Marcus asked, noting the serious expressions. Dr. Hayes stood. "May asked me to come check on the baby after her ride yesterday. Everything is fine, but I need to talk to both of you about something important." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "What is it?" "Sit down, Marcus." He sat. May reached over and took his hand, and that simple gesture steadied him. "The baby is healthy and strong," Dr. Hayes said, "but May's pregnancy has been difficult. The malnutrition early on, the stress, the physical labor. She's at higher risk for complications during delivery. I'm not saying this to scare you, but you both need to be prepared. When the time comes, I'll need help. Real help, not just Sam and his good intentions." "What kind of help?" Marcus asked. "Another woman who knows what she's doing. Sarah Curtis has delivered babies before. I'd like her to assist. And I think it would be safer if May stayed here at the ranch house for the last month of her pregnancy, not out at the cabin. If something happens, if she goes into labor early, I need to be able to get to her quickly." May started to protest, but Dr. Hayes cut her off. "I know you value your independence, but this isn't about that. This is about keeping you and your baby alive. The cabin is wonderful, but it's too far from help. Stay here. Let Marcus and Sam take care of you. Let the community you've been building support you. That's what families do." May looked at Marcus. He saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear he felt. The memory of Sarah dying in childbirth was still raw in his mind, probably always would be, but he also saw determination. May wasn't Sarah, this wasn't then. They had choices. Preparation help. "Stay," Marcus said quietly. "Please, move into the ranch house. We'll make sure you and the baby have everything you need." "What about the cabin?" "It'll be there when you're ready to go back, if you still want to. Or," he paused, "or maybe you don't go back. Maybe you stay here? In the house, permanently." Dr. Hayes smiled. "I'll take that as my cue to leave. May come see me next week for another check. Marcus, make sure she rests. She's been doing too much." After the doctor left, Marcus and May sat at the kitchen table while Sam busied himself at the stove, pretending not to listen. "You're asking me to move in," May said. "Into your house, your home. I'm asking you to be safe. The rest we can figure out as we go. People will talk. People are already talking. Let them." She was quiet for a moment, one hand on her belly where Marcus could see the baby moving, pressing against her skin from inside. A foot, maybe, or a hand. "All right," she finally said. "I'll stay. But Marcus, when this baby comes, when we're both safe and healthy, we need to talk about what this is. what we are. I won't just be your charity case or your employee who happens to live in your house. If I'm here, I need to be here as more than that." "What do you want to be?" She met his eyes, and there was no hesitation in her voice. "Your partner, your equal, your family, if that's what you want too." "It is," Marcus said. "It's exactly what I want." Sam turned from the stove with a plate of food. "Well, thank God that's settled. Now eat something, both of you, before I have to start charging room and board." And just like that, the decision was made. May moved into the ranch house that night, taking the guest room on the first floor that had the best light and was closest to the kitchen. They moved her things from the cabin the next day, Marcus and Sam and Tommy, making trips back and forth, bringing everything she'd accumulated. The house transformed. Curtains she'd made appeared in windows. Books she'd borrowed from Sarah Curtis appeared on shelves. The smell of her cooking, a blend of Chinese and British and pure improvisation, filled the rooms. And at night Marcus would lie in his bed and hear her moving around below, humming to herself, and feel something that had been frozen for 7 years slowly thawing. 2 weeks before her due date, sitting on the porch in the evening cool, May said, "Tell me about Sarah, really tell me. I want to know her." So Marcus did. He told her about meeting Sarah at a church social, about how she'd laughed at his awkward attempts at courting about their wedding in that same church with Father Murphy officiating, about how she'd wanted to fill the ranch house with children and life, how she'd had names picked out, a dozen of them just in case, about the pregnancy that had seemed perfect until suddenly it wasn't, about the blood and the screaming and the terrible silence after. When he finished, May was crying quietly, tears running down her cheeks. "She sounds wonderful," May said. "I wish I could have known her. She would have liked you." "Do you think she'd mind about us?" Marcus thought about that, really thought about it. No. Sarah believed in living, in moving forward, in love wherever you found it. She'd be glad I wasn't alone anymore. And she'd be protective of you and the baby like a mother bear. May reached over and took his hand. They sat like that as stars came out and the night grew cool, two people who'd been broken by loss, learning how to be whole again together. And in Marcus's chest, where for 7 years there had been only silence and scar tissue, he felt his heart beat with something that felt almost like hope. The baby came on a Tuesday morning in late August, 3 days after her due date, when the world was hot and still and waiting. May had been restless all night. Marcus heard her pacing downstairs, heard the creak of floorboards as she moved from room to room. He'd come down twice to check on her, found her standing at windows, looking out at the darkness, one hand on her belly. "Can't sleep," he'd asked the second time. "Something's different. The baby's quiet. Usually she kicks all night, but tonight nothing. Should I get Dr. Hayes?" "Not yet. It might be nothing. Go back to bed, Marcus. You need rest." He'd gone back upstairs but hadn't slept. Just lay there, listening, waiting, feeling the house hold its breath. At dawn he heard May call out, not screaming, just his name, urgent and tight. He was down the stairs before the sound finished echoing, finding her in the kitchen, gripping the table, her face pale, a puddle of water at her feet. "It's time," she said. "My water broke." Marcus felt the world narrow to a single point of focus. "Sam!" he bellowed. "Sam, get Dr. Hayes, now!" Sam appeared from his room off the kitchen, took one look at May, and was moving. "I'll bring Sarah Curtis, too. Be back in an hour." "Make it half an hour," Marcus said. Then they were alone. Marcus helped May to the bedroom on the first floor, the one they'd prepared with clean sheets and towels and everything Dr. Hayes had told them to have ready. May's breathing was coming faster, her face tightening with pain. "How far apart are the contractions?" Marcus asked, trying to remember everything the doctor had said. 10 minutes, maybe less. They started about an hour ago, but I thought they were just false labor. They've been getting stronger." Marcus looked at her. This woman who'd walked 8 weeks pregnant across territories, who'd survived fever and loss, and rebuilt a life from nothing. She was scared. He could see it in her eyes. And so was he terrified in a way he hadn't been since the night Sarah died. "You're going to be fine," he said, more to convince himself than her. "Dr. Hayes knows what she's doing. Sarah Curtis has delivered a dozen babies. You're strong, May, stronger than anyone I know." "David's mother died in childbirth," May said quietly. "He never told me until I was already pregnant. I think he was scared too. This is different. You're not alone. You have help, the best help." She gripped his hand as another contraction hit her fingers, crushing his. He held on, letting her squeeze as hard as she needed, watching the pain move across her face in waves. When it passed, she was breathing hard, sweat already beading on her forehead. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't leave me alone. I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Dr. Hayes arrived 40 minutes later with Sarah Curtis, both women moving with efficient purpose. They took over the bedroom, Dr. Hayes examining May while Sarah began organizing supplies, boiling water, laying out instruments. Marcus was exiled to the hallway where he paced like a caged animal. Sam joined him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Here," Sam said, pressing one into Marcus's shaking hands. "Drink. You look like you're about to pass out." "I can't do this again, Sam. I can't watch another woman I care about die in that room. She's not Sarah. And this time we've got real help, not just a country doctor 3 hours away. Dr. Hayes is good. Sarah Curtis is good. They'll bring her through." "You don't know that." "No, but I know May. That woman has survived things that would break most people. She's not giving up now, and neither should you." From inside the room, May cried out, not screaming, but a low sound of pain that cut through Marcus like a knife. He moved toward the door, but Sam caught his arm. "Let them work. You go in there all panicked, you'll just make it harder for everyone." Marcus wanted to argue, but knew Sam was right. He resumed pacing, coffee forgotten in his hand. Minutes stretched into hours. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the house hot and airless. Marcus opened windows, trying to create a breeze, but the air was still and heavy. Inside the bedroom, voices rose and fell. Dr. Hayes giving instructions, Sarah Curtis responding, May, her voice getting weaker, answering questions, and underneath it, all the sounds of labor, primal and frightening and ancient. Around noon, Dr. Hayes emerged, wiping her hands on a towel. Marcus was on his feet instantly. "She's doing well," the doctor said before he could ask. "Labor is progressing normally, but it's going to be a while yet. First babies take time. Could be another few hours, could be longer. Can I see her?" "For a moment. But Marcus, don't tire her out. She needs to save her strength." He went in. The room smelled of sweat and something metallic that made his stomach turn. May was propped up on pillows, her hair soaked with sweat, face flushed. But when she saw him, she smiled weakly. "Still here," she said. "Where else would I be?" He took her hand, careful not to grip too tight. "How are you?" "It hurts more than I expected, doctor. Hayes says everything is normal, but Marcus, it really hurts." "I know, I'm sorry. I wish I could do something." "You are doing something. You're here." Another contraction started. He could see it building, see her body tense. "You should go. I don't want you to see me like this." "I'm not going anywhere. I promised, remember." She couldn't answer. The contraction took her, and she gripped his hand with strength he didn't know she still had. He held on, whispering things he wasn't even sure made sense, just trying to give her something to focus on besides the pain. When it passed, Dr. Hayes was there. "Marcus out. She needs to rest between contractions." He left reluctantly, returned to pacing. Sam had given up trying to make him sit. They just walked together up and down the hallway, while inside the bedroom, life struggled to begin. It was mid-afternoon when things changed. Marcus heard Dr. Hayes's voice rise sharply, heard Sarah Curtis respond with urgency. Then May screamed, really screamed, a sound that tore through the house and Marcus's heart at the same time. He was at the door in an instant, Sam right behind him. Dr. Hayes appeared, her face grim. "The baby's breech. Feet first instead of head first. I need to turn it, or this gets very dangerous very quickly. Can you do it?" "I can try, but Marcus, you need to prepare yourself. Sometimes in situations like this we have to make choices. Save the mother or save the baby. I need to know what you want me to do if it comes to that." The world stopped. Marcus felt like he was back in this exact moment 7 years ago, a doctor asking him the same impossible question. Then he'd been too paralyzed to answer. By the time he found words, it was too late for both. "Save May," he said without hesitation. "If you have to choose, save her." Dr. Hayes nodded. "I'll do everything I can for both, but I needed to know." She started to turn back, but Marcus caught her arm. "Wait, let me tell her. She should know I chose her." He pushed past into the room. May was curled on her side, crying quietly, while Sarah Curtis held her hand. She looked up when Marcus entered, her eyes wide and scared. "The baby's breech," Marcus said, kneeling beside the bed. "Dr. Hayes is going to try to turn it. But May, I need you to know something. If they can't, if it comes down to a choice, I told them to save you. Do you understand? You come first." "No," May said immediately. "The baby. Save the baby." "I'm not losing you. Marcus, this is David's child, his legacy. I can't let it die. I won't. And I can't let you die. May, listen to me. I love you. I haven't said it before because I was scared, because it felt too soon, because I didn't think I had the right. But I love you, and I'm not watching you die. Not for anything." Tears were streaming down her face. "I love you too. That's why the baby matters, because it's not just David's child anymore. It's ours, our family, our future. You can't ask me to give up on that." "I'm not asking. I'm telling you what I already decided." Dr. Hayes stepped forward. "This is touching, but we don't have time for this debate. I'm going to try to turn the baby. If I can, this whole conversation is moot. May, this is going to hurt, worse than anything so far, but I need you to stay as still as possible. Can you do that?" May nodded, her jaw set. Marcus stayed beside her, holding her hand. Dr. Hayes pressed her hands against May's swollen belly, feeling for the baby's position. Then she began to push, manipulating from outside, trying to shift the child into proper position. May screamed. It was a sound Marcus would hear in nightmares for the rest of his life, raw and agonized. But she held still, held his hand so tight he felt bones grind, and let Dr. Hayes work. It seemed to take forever. In reality, it was probably less than a minute. Then Dr. Hayes stepped back, breathing hard. "Got it. Baby's head down now. We can proceed normally." She looked at May. "That was the worst of it, I promise. From here it's just regular labor." "Just," May gasped out, trying to laugh through tears. "There's nothing just about this." Marcus kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her hands. "You're amazing. So strong. So brave." "Get out," Dr. Hayes said, but not unkindly. "Let us work. You'll know when it's time." Marcus left, stumbled into the hallway, and promptly threw up in the bucket Sam had thoughtfully placed there. Sam rubbed his back while he heaved, saying nothing, just being there. "She's going to make it," Sam said when Marcus finally straightened. "They both are." "You don't know that." "I do. Because May's not the type to die. She's a survivor. Now pull yourself together. Your woman is about to give birth, and she needs you strong, not falling apart." Marcus splashed water on his face from the basin. Sam provided, drank more coffee, tried to steady his hands. The sun was setting now, painting the house in orange and gold. Nearly 12 hours of labor. How much more could May take? As if in answer, Dr. Hayes called out, "Marcus, it's time. Get in here." He went. May was sitting up now, Sarah Curtis supporting her from behind. Her face was red and strained, exhausted beyond anything Marcus had ever seen. But her eyes were alert, fierce, determined. "I want him here," May said when she saw him. "For this part, I want Marcus here." Dr. Hayes looked like she wanted to argue, but just nodded. "Fine, but stay at her head, hold her hand, and don't pass out. I've got enough to deal with." Marcus positioned himself beside May, taking her hand. She gripped it weakly, all her strength depleted. "Next contraction, I need you to push," Dr. Hayes said, positioned at the foot of the bed. "Big push like you're trying to move a mountain. Ready." The contraction came. May bore down her face, contorting with effort. Marcus held her hand, murmured encouragement, felt completely useless and utterly necessary at the same time. Good, Dr. Hayes said. Again, next contraction. They fell into a rhythm. Contraction, push, rest. Over and over. Marcus lost track of time. His entire world narrowed to May's face. May's hand in his, the sound of her breathing, and Dr. Hayes's steady instructions. Then, Dr. Hayes said, One more big push and we're there. I can see the head. May gathered herself for one final effort. Marcus felt her hand tighten, saw her face go red, heard her make a sound that was half scream and half battle cry, and then another sound, new and perfect and miraculous. A baby crying. It's a girl, Dr. Hayes announced, holding up a squirming, red-faced infant. A beautiful, healthy baby girl. May collapsed back against Sarah Curtis, sobbing. Marcus stared at the baby, this tiny person who hadn't existed a moment ago, and now was real and breathing and wailing her objection to the cold new world. Dr. Hayes worked quickly, cutting the cord, cleaning the baby. Then she wrapped the infant in a clean blanket and placed her on May's chest. "Hello, little one," May whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, I'm your mama. We've been waiting for you." The baby stopped crying at the sound of her voice, dark eyes trying to focus on the face above her. She had a shock of black hair. May's delicate features and tiny, perfect hands that waved in the air like she was conducting music only she could hear. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. He just stared at May, holding the baby at this moment he thought he would never have, that he'd thought was lost forever with Sarah. "Marcus," May said softly, "come meet your daughter. Not David's daughter, not May's daughter. Ours, our daughter." He reached out with one shaking finger and touched the baby's hand. Immediately, her tiny fingers wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. And something in Marcus's chest that had been locked tight for 7 years cracked open completely, flooding him with joy and terror and love so intense it hurt. "She's perfect," he managed. "You're both perfect." Dr. Hayes finished her work, checking to make sure May was healing properly. "Everything looks good. Better than good, actually. You did beautifully, May. Now you need to rest. Both of you." Sarah Curtis helped arrange pillows, made sure May was comfortable. "Have you picked a name?" May looked at Marcus. They'd discussed names, had a few favorites, but nothing definite. Now looking at this child, Marcus knew. "Margaret," he said. "After my mother, Margaret Sarah Sullivan Blackstone." "Sullivan Blackstone?" May asked. "If that's all right with you, she should carry both names, David's and mine, so she knows where she came from and where she belongs." May smiled through her exhaustion. "Margaret Sarah Sullivan Blackstone, Maggie for short. Yes, that's perfect." Oh. Dr. Hayes and Sarah Curtis left them alone, closing the door quietly. Marcus pulled a chair close to the bed and sat unable to look away from May and the baby. "Thank you," May whispered, "for choosing me, for being here, for everything. Thank you for surviving, for being so strong, for giving me this. We gave each other this." She adjusted the baby who was already rooting around looking to nurse. Our family. Marcus watched as May helped little Maggie latch on, watched the baby's eyes drift closed in contentment. He felt something he hadn't felt since before Sarah died. Peace. Complete and total peace. "Marry me," he said suddenly. "I know I should ask more romantically. I know you just gave birth and you're exhausted, but May, marry me. Make this official. Make us a real family in the eyes of God and the law and everyone else." May looked up at him, eyes shining. "Yes, of course, yes. I was just waiting for you to ask. When I can stand up without falling over, when I can fit into a dress that isn't maternity wear, when Father Murphy is available." She smiled. "A month maybe, is that too long?" "It's perfect." Marcus leaned forward and kissed her forehead, careful not to disturb the baby. "You rest now. I'll tell Sam and the others. They'll want to know everyone is safe." He left the room reluctantly, found Sam waiting in the hallway with half the ranch hands, all of them looking worried and hopeful. "It's a girl," Marcus announced. "Mother and baby both healthy. Margaret Sarah Sullivan Blackstone. 8 pounds, Dr. Hayes said. Perfect in every way." The cheer that went up probably woke Maggie, but Marcus didn't care. He was too busy accepting backslaps and handshakes and congratulations, too busy feeling joy bubble up inside him like a spring that had been capped too long and was finally free to flow. The next 4 weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. Marcus discovered that babies were tiny tyrants who demanded constant attention and gave nothing back except occasional smiles that might just be gasps but felt like benedictions. He also discovered he didn't mind, not one bit. Maggie slept in a cradle in May's room, and Marcus found himself checking on them both a dozen times a night, just to make sure they were breathing, that they were real, that this wasn't another dream he'd wake from to find himself alone again. May recovered quickly, stronger than Dr. Hayes had expected. Within 2 weeks she was up and moving around normally, nursing Maggie and managing the household with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. The women from town came by regularly, Sarah Curtis and Margaret O'Brien, and Patricia Gonzalez, bringing food and baby clothes and advice, whether asked for or not. The cabin sat empty. They didn't talk about it, but it was understood. May wasn't moving back. This was her home now, her family. The cabin would be there if needed, but it was already becoming memory instead of future. The wedding was planned for the last Sunday in September after morning mass in the church with Father Murphy officiating. Simple because neither of them wanted anything elaborate, just vows and witnesses and the beginning of something official. But Victor Hayes had other plans. The trouble started on a Wednesday afternoon 3 weeks after Maggie was born. Marcus was in the barn checking on a mare about to foal when Tommy came running in, face pale. "Boss, there's a marshal here to see you. Federal marshal from Cheyenne. He's asking about May." Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. Victor. It had to be Victor going around him like Sam had predicted. He walked to the house slowly, giving himself time to think. The marshal was waiting on the porch, a tall man in his 40s with a badge on his vest and a hard face that had seen too much of humanity's worst. "Marcus Blackstone," the marshal asked. "That's me." "I'm Marshal Jack Thornton. I'm here regarding a Mrs. May Sullivan. I'm told she resides on your property." "She lives in my house. She's my fiancée. We're getting married in 2 weeks." "That's convenient timing." The marshal pulled out a folded paper. "I have a warrant here for her arrest. Theft, San Francisco, 1886. $200 from her employer. I need to take her into custody." Marcus kept his voice level. "That charge is false. She took her own wages after her employer tried to force her into an arrangement she didn't agree to. It's not theft. That's for a judge to decide, not you or me. Where is she? Inside with our daughter, our 3-week-old daughter. You're not taking her anywhere." The marshal's expression didn't change. "Sir, I understand this is difficult, but I have a job to do. I can do it easy or I can do it hard. Your choice." "You can't arrest a woman who just gave birth. It's not humane." "The law doesn't care about humane. It cares about warrants and jurisdictions. Now you going to bring her out, or do I have to go in?" Before Marcus could answer, the door opened. May stood there, Maggie in her arms, her face pale but composed. "I'm May Sullivan," she said clearly. "I assume you're here for me." "Ma'am, I have a warrant for your arrest. You need to come with me to Cheyenne for arraignment. Can I at least put my daughter down?" "Of course." May turned and handed Maggie to Sarah Curtis, who had appeared behind her. Then she walked out onto the porch head high and held out her hands. "I'm ready." "No," Marcus said. "This is wrong. Marshal, give me 24 hours. Let me contact a lawyer. Let me get the evidence together to show the charge is false. She's not a flight risk. She's got a 3-week-old baby. Where is she going to go?" The marshal hesitated. "I shouldn't. 24 hours. If the evidence doesn't convince you, you can arrest her then. I give you my word she'll still be here." Long moment of silence. Then the marshal sighed. 24 hours. But if she runs, that's on you. And I'll be back with more men and less patience." He left. Marcus turned to find half the ranch hands had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Sam was there, and Sarah Curtis, and Dr. Hayes, who must have been visiting. "What do we do?" Sarah asked. "We fight," Marcus said. "We get a lawyer, we get depositions, we prove May is innocent, and we do it in 24 hours. They spent the evening sending telegrams to lawyers in Cheyenne and San Francisco, to Father Murphy in the city who'd married May and David, asking for testimony about her character, to anyone who might have information about the restaurant owner who'd accused her. The responses started coming back by morning. Most weren't helpful. The lawyer in San Francisco said the charge was old, but valid, hard to fight without the accuser's confession. The lawyer in Cheyenne said they could probably get bail, but it would take weeks to go to trial. Then, around noon, a telegram arrived that changed everything. It was from a woman named Lin Chen, who identified herself as May's cousin. She'd heard about the warrant years ago, but hadn't known where May had gone. The telegram was brief. Restaurant owner Wong Tao died 6 months ago. Deathbed confession to priest. Admitted falsifying theft charge against May Chen Sullivan. Wanted to force her into marriage with his brother. Priest will testify. Sending affidavit by fast post. Marcus read it 3 times, hardly believing. "Sam, ride to town. Tell the telegraph operator to send this to Marshal Thornton in Cheyenne immediately. And get me Father Murphy. We need him here." By evening, Father Murphy had arrived along with Sarah Curtis's husband, the sheriff, and most of the women from town. They gathered in the ranch house parlor while May sat with Maggie trying to stay calm. "This is good," Father Murphy said, reading the telegram. "Very good. A deathbed confession carries weight. And if the priest who heard it is willing to testify, that makes the warrant invalid." "Will the marshal see it that way?" May asked. "He should. But we need to be prepared in case he doesn't." The priest looked around the room at the assembled crowd. "Which is why I asked all of you here. This community has embraced May and her daughter. Now it's time to show what that means." Sarah Curtis stood. "I'll testify to her character, to the work she's done, the person she is. So will every woman in this room." "I'll post bail if it comes to that," Margaret O'Brien said, "however much it takes." "I'll provide medical testimony that she's not fit to travel with a newborn," Dr. Hayes added. One by one, people spoke up, ranch hands offering to escort May to Cheyenne if she had to go, neighbors offering money, time, whatever was needed. Even people Marcus didn't know well, people who'd simply met May at church or in town and seen her kindness. Marcus felt his throat tighten. This was what community meant, what family meant, not just blood, but choice people standing up for each other when it mattered. "Thank you," May said, her voice breaking. "All of you. I never expected this. Never thought I'd find a place that would accept me, much less defend me." "You're one of us now," Sarah Curtis said simply. "That's what we do for our own." Marshal Thornton returned the next afternoon as promised, but this time he wasn't alone. Father Murphy was with him and Sheriff Curtis and a lawyer from Cheyenne who'd been sent by Marcus's telegram. They all convened in the parlor while May waited upstairs with Maggie. The marshal read the affidavit that had arrived by fast post. Lin Chen's statement, the priest's testimony, evidence that Wong Tao had admitted on his deathbed to falsifying the charges. When he finished, he set the papers down and looked at Marcus. "This changes things," he said. "If this confession is legitimate, and I have no reason to think it isn't, then the warrant is based on false information. I can't in good conscience enforce it." "So May is free?" Marcus asked. "She'll need to appear before a judge in San Francisco to have the charge officially dismissed, but I won't be arresting her today or any day, and I'll be recommending the warrant be vacated immediately." The relief in the room was palpable. Marcus felt his legs weaken, had to sit down before he fell. It was over. The last threat to their future gone. "There's one more thing," Father Murphy said. "Marcus and May are scheduled to be married in 10 days. I'd like to move the ceremony up to tomorrow if possible. Given everything that's happened, I think it would be good to formalize their union as soon as possible." "Tomorrow," May said from the doorway. She'd come downstairs, drawn by the sound of voices, Maggie in her arms. "But we don't have anything ready." "You have everything ready," Sarah Curtis said. "Love, family, community. That's all a wedding needs. The rest is just decoration." So the wedding was scheduled for the next day, Sunday after morning mass. Word spread through town like wildfire. By Saturday evening the church was decorated with wildflowers, and the parsonage kitchen was full of food for the reception. Marcus spent Saturday night unable to sleep, thinking about Sarah, about promises and second chances, and the strange path his life had taken. He'd loved Sarah completely, would always love her. But what he felt for May was different, no less real, but shaped by different experiences, different needs. Sarah had been his youth. May was his future. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect autumn weather. Marcus dressed in his best suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, and hadn't touched since. Sam helped him with his tie, grumbling about fancy nonsense, but with tears in his old eyes. "Sarah would be proud of you, boss," Sam said. "You did right by her memory, grieved proper. But you're doing right by yourself now, too, moving forward. That takes courage." At the church, Marcus stood at the altar with Father Murphy while the congregation filed in. The pews filled quickly. Sarah Curtis and the ladies from town, Sheriff Curtis and his deputies, ranch hands, cleaned up and dressed in their best families. Marcus had known for years, and even some he didn't know, people who'd simply heard about the wedding and wanted to be part of something hopeful. Then the organ began to play, and May appeared at the back of the church. She wore the burgundy dress she'd made, altered again to fit her post-pregnancy body, with wildflowers in her hair that Sarah Curtis had woven that morning. She carried Maggie in one arm and a small bouquet in the other. She wasn't given away by anyone. She walked alone by choice, a statement that she came to this marriage as an equal partner, not property to be transferred. Marcus couldn't breathe. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that. She was strong and brave, and everything he'd thought he'd never find again. She reached the altar and handed Maggie to Sarah Curtis, who'd agreed to hold the baby during the ceremony. Then she turned to Marcus and smiled, and he felt his heart do something it hadn't done in 7 years. It felt young again, full of possibility. Father Murphy's voice was warm as he began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join Marcus Blackstone and Machen Sullivan in holy matrimony. This is a union built not on convenience or necessity, but on mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared commitment to building a life together." He led them through the traditional vows. Marcus spoke clearly, his voice steady, his eyes never leaving May's face. May spoke hers in that slight British accent, her voice clear and strong, despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "I, Machen Sullivan, take you, Marcus Blackstone, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Marcus slipped a simple gold band on her finger, one he'd had made in town, engraved inside with the date and their initials. May did the same, though Marcus hadn't expected it, hadn't thought about a ring for himself. But she'd planned ahead, had Sam help her order one, and now it sat on his finger, solid and real and binding. "By the power vested in me by the Catholic Church and the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride." Marcus had thought about this moment, wondered if it would feel strange, like a betrayal of Sarah. But when he leaned down and kissed May, soft and gentle and full of promise, all he felt was right. This was right. They were right. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. Maggie, startled by the noise, began to cry, and May immediately took her back from Sarah Curtis, soothing her while still holding Marcus's hand. The three of them stood there at the altar, a family, while everyone celebrated around them. The reception was held in the church hall, tables groaning with food that the town women had prepared. There was music and dancing and more joy than Marcus had seen in years. People toasted the newlyweds, told stories, welcomed May officially into the community. Late in the afternoon, as the celebration was winding down, Victor Hayes appeared at the door. The hall went quiet. Marcus tensed, ready for another confrontation. But Victor just stood there looking at May holding Maggie, at the celebration around them, at the community that had chosen her over his objections. "I came to apologize," Victor said finally. "I've been wrong about a lot of things. About her, about what matters, about what it means to be part of a community." He looked directly at May. "Mrs. Blackstone, I'm sorry. For the trouble I caused, for the pain I tried to inflict, for being so blind to your worth. I hope you can forgive me." May studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I forgive you, Mr. Hayes. Everyone deserves a chance to change." Victor nodded back, then turned and left. The hall remained quiet for a moment, then conversation slowly resumed, though subdued now. "That was unexpected," Marcus said. "Grace usually is," Father Murphy replied. "But that's what makes it grace." As evening fell, Marcus and May left the reception and returned to the ranch. Sam had agreed to keep Maggie for the night, giving them their first night alone as husband and wife. They walked through the house, the same house that had felt like a tomb for 7 years, and it felt completely different now. Alive, warm, home. They made love that night, for the first time gentle and careful, because May was still healing from childbirth, but no less meaningful for its tenderness. Afterward, lying in Marcus's bed, in what was now their bed, May traced patterns on his chest with one finger. "Tell me what you're thinking," she said. "I'm thinking about promises, the ones I kept and the ones I made, the ones I thought I'd never make again." "What promises are you making now?" Marcus pulled her closer. "To build a life with you, to be a father to Maggie and any other children we might have, to fill this house with family and noise and joy, to never take for granted what we've been given. Those are good promises." May was quiet for a moment. "I have something to tell you. I was going to wait, but now seems right." "What is it?" "Dr. Hayes confirmed it yesterday. I'm pregnant again, about 6 weeks along. Must have happened right after Maggie was born." She laughed softly. "We're going to have another baby, Marcus. 2 children less than a year apart." Marcus should have been shocked, should have been worried about the timing, the risks, the challenges. Instead, he felt joy bubble up inside him, pure and uncomplicated. "Good," he said. "The house has room for 12 children if needed. Let's fill it up." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, while outside the Wyoming night spread vast and star-filled over Blackstone Ridge, and in the Miller cabin, sitting empty and patient in its hollow wildflowers, still grew along the path where May had planted them, a permanent reminder of where their story had begun. 5 months later, in late winter, May gave birth to a son. They named him David Marcus Blackstone, honoring both the past and the future. Father Murphy baptized him on the same Sunday he baptized Margaret, whom they'd waited to baptize until her mother was married. The church was full again. The same people who'd stood up for May when she needed defending now celebrated with her, watched her children grow, became aunts and uncles and grandparents by choice, if not by blood. Victor Hayes kept his word about changing. He became a quiet supporter of the church's charity work, particularly programs helping new immigrants find work and housing. He never tried to buy the Miller cabin land again. And when May and Marcus opened the cabin as a shelter for women in difficult circumstances, Victor donated the first $500 to keep it running. The cabin became known as Sullivan House, named for both David and May. Over the years, dozens of women passed through its doors finding temporary refuge and help getting back on their feet. Some stayed for weeks, some for months. All of them left stronger than they'd arrived. Maggie and David grew up surrounded by love and community, learning from their mother about resilience and from their father about integrity. They knew their mother's story, knew about David Sullivan, who'd loved her, first knew about the journey she'd made alone and pregnant across territories. They were proud of her, proud of where they came from. Years later, when Maggie was 16 and beginning to think about her own future, she asked Marcus about those early days, about finding her mother in the cabin, about taking in a stranger. "Weren't you scared?" she asked. "Taking on so much responsibility, so much risk." Marcus thought about his answer carefully. Terrified. "But I'd been living half alive for 7 years, scared of my own shadow, scared of caring too much, scared of loss. Your mother taught me that being scared isn't a good enough reason not to try, that sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all." Do you ever wish things had been different, that you'd just left her at the cabin that first day? Never? Not once? Finding your mother, building this family with her, it's the best thing I ever did. Second best was keeping the promise I made to Mary Miller to make sure that cabin became a home again. Turns out it became home for a lot of people, not just one. Maggie smiled. "I want to be like her. Strong like that. Brave like that." "You already are," Marcus said. "You come from strong stock on all sides. David Sullivan's courage, your mother's resilience, your grandmother Sarah's kindness. You're a combination of the best of all of us." That night, Marcus and May sat on their porch, as they did most evenings, watching the sun set over land that felt more like home than it ever had. Maggie and David were inside doing homework, arguing about something inconsequential in the way siblings do. The sound of their voices through the open windows was the sound of life continuing. "Do you ever think about that first day?" May asked. "When you found me half dead in the cabin?" "Every day," Marcus admitted. "I think about how close I came to not checking on that smoke, to assuming it was just drifters and sending someone else to run them off. How different everything would be if I'd made different choices." "But you didn't. You came yourself. You helped a stranger. You kept your promise to Mary Miller and ended up keeping 1,000 promises you didn't even know you were making." "We both did. You promised David you'd raise your child in the faith. You kept that promise. But you also made new promises. To me, to our children, to this community." May leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think promises were traps, things that kept you locked in the past. But you taught me they're bridges, ways to honor where you've been while still moving toward where you're going." "So where are we going now?" "Forward together, with our children and our community and whatever the future brings. Because that's what we do, Marcus. We survive. We adapt. We build." "We build," Marcus agreed. And inside Sullivan House, formerly the Miller cabin, a woman fleeing a bad situation was being welcomed by volunteers, given food and shelter and hope. The light from the cabin's windows spread warm and golden across the hollow, a beacon in the darkness for anyone who needed it. Just as it had been for May all those years ago, when a woman, alone and desperate, had found smoke rising from an abandoned place and decided it meant life instead of death, hope instead of despair, home instead of just another stop on an endless road. There are promises you keep to the living, and there are promises you keep to the dead. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those promises lead you exactly where you need to be, to family you didn't know you were looking for, to love you thought you'd lost forever, to a future built on the ashes of the past, solid and strong and enduring. This was Marcus Blackstone's promise. This was May Sullivan Blackstone's legacy. This was their story, told and retold in Copper Falls for generations. A reminder that sometimes salvation comes from keeping faith, from opening doors, instead of closing them, from choosing hope, even when fear seems wiser. And that is the truest promise of all, the end.